This is ATL Day Ones, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
It is ATL Day Ones. I'm Jarvis Davis. That is Tenitra Batiste. She's back. She's somewhere around a place shaped like a boot. You know, I'll let y'all fill in the blanks. I ain't going to say it. You know, if she want to say it, she can say it, but I ain't going to say it today. T, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thanks, man. I'm good, except I'm dealing with the nastiness of humidity. We think there's a lot of humidity in Atlanta, but sorry. The New Orleans metro area, Atlanta ain't got nothing on us. So I am like in this scorcher, but hey, cool to be home.
It's cool to be home, and we are figuring this thing out. And we're going to got a lot of good stuff on board for you today. Terry Fontenot is out here running at the yapper about open competition. Yeah, we'll talk about all of that because we've heard that movie before. And the Braves, they're starting to do their thing. I think they got this thing figured out. And last but not least, in For the Culture, we'll be discussing Drake being really disrespectful. All that is coming up, but before we get into Terry Fontenot, I definitely want to say a quick thank you to all of the people who have liked and subscribed to our YouTube page. That's Locked On Sports Atlanta. Go to the search engine, just type in Locked On Sports Atlanta, and we'll pop up. And make sure you continue to do that and follow us on all of the audio platforms. We're streaming on all of those. Wherever you download your podcast, that's exactly where we are. And if you've done so already, thank you. Thank you. All right, now, T. Terry Fontenot was doing an interview on Pro Football Talk. You know, Mike Florio, the guy, heads that thing up. And he has some interesting things to say as far as about training camp, right? He started talking about the 53, and there was a one quote that it just stood out to me. He said, we're going to have all 90 players all competing to be part of the 53.
Right.
And on a weekly basis, they're going to be competing to get a jersey on game day to be one of the 48.
Yes.
And this seems to be a theme here because I'll take you back to when Arthur Smith was speaking about the running back competition. He was answering a question in response to Tyler Algier about, as far as playing time and what that's going to look like. And he basically said it's going to be wide open. So here you have the head coach talking about things being wide open, and here you are talking about Terry Fontenot talking about an open competition, even at the quarterback position. A lot of people assume that Marcus Mariota is going to be the starter.
Right.
So is this for real?
I think so. I definitely think so. Literally, and the rest of what he said is to answer your question. And as it relates to him saying competing to get a jersey, Terry Fontenot went on to say, quote, "That's truly how we see this. We'll continue to add competition at every position. And that's what's really exciting about this." So, yeah, I believe that they are saying at every position, they mean what they say because they've been consistent. Arthur Smith has said it. Terry Fontenot has said it. And then the draft picks and what they've done in what they did in free agency also says it. So, yeah, I believe it's truly an open competition under center. Yes, Marcus Mariota is going in as the de facto QB1, but I don't think that that's something that is etched in stone for 17 games, not by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't think that it's necessarily the case that he's going to be QB1 come opening day. And you and I talked about this as well when we talked about some of the draft picks and whether or not they would actually start game one or whether we would see them as starters a couple of weeks down. So that's that other piece to it, Jarvis, that I see. Whether or not Marcus Mariota finishes the season as the starter or Desmond Ridder finishes the season as the starter, I do think it's wide open.
Yeah, and that's cool, right? Because, we've heard in the previous regime under Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitroff, they talked about open competitions and going out there competing and toughness and all that stuff. And that wasn't necessarily the case. A lot of times guys came in and they were deemed starters, and that's what it was. And it kind of stayed that way. And to be honest with you, I don't care what locker room you in. I don't care what level you're on.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the locker room where you know guys are going to start and you don't really
Right.
have an opportunity to start when you have a pretty good idea that you should be,
Right.
especially when the people are in front of you aren't that good.
Right.
That's an issue. That can turn a locker room really quickly. And I give you a quick example. Um, I talked back probably about a few years ago, right before Julio Jones got traded. I was talking to a source close to the team, and he told me that Julio Jones, when Cam Newton became a free agent, he said that Julio Jones requested that the Falcons sign Cam Newton.
Mm.
And of course, they rebutted that. And when they did, his response was, I thought everybody out here trying to compete for a position.
Ha.
So if the superstar of the team is sitting here saying, hey, this is what y'all need to do, and to validate what you're saying, I think that says something. That says how that locker room was, and probably give you a peek into why that regime ultimately failed and everybody ended up getting fired.
Yes.
And Julio Jones is probably no longer around. So it kind of gives you a peek into what that was. But I think the difference now with Terry Fontenot, them saying, I'm starting to kind of believe that, because you see the plan, right? We always talked about
Yes.
how the vision, right, and writing it out and making it plain. And he wrote it out in the draft,
Yeah.
by drafting the Justin Schaefer, because you had issues at guard last year, and if Jalen Mayfield doesn't get better, shoot, somebody's probably going to be coming for a spot, or whether
Yes.
that's Jermaine Ifedi if he goes down and bumps down and plays guard as well. So there are a lot of things that I think that are in place that I'm starting to believe this
Yeah.
message that they're trying to convey.
Yeah. And Arthur Smith showed us last year that he's willing to mix things up and shake things up at any position. And you mentioned it. The one that we saw it at the most was at on the O line, and some of it was for obvious reasons due to injury, but some
Right.
of it was because the quality of play just never rose to the level of his expectation. So yeah, I do believe that this might be the first time, at least since you and I have been covering the team, and maybe even you as a longtime, lifelong fan have seen that the back office and the field generals, meaning the sideline generals, actually do mean what they say in terms of no, this is really a wide open competition. The other thing I thought about was this, Jarvis, that puts people on notice. Now, you and I have talked
Mm.
about the fact that with the Hawks, that was something that somewhere around the trade deadline, when
Mm-hmm.
Travis Lincoln had enough, he literally basically said everybody was on notice that anything could happen. And his expectations were that everybody stepped up their game. And so now we're seeing something very similar right now
Right.
with the Falcons, where they're basically putting everybody on notice and saying, everybody, whole roster, you're on notice.
I say, and I, you know what? I started jotting when we kind of talked about this in our pre-show meeting. I was just saying, I started jotting down some names that I know for a fact that they're going to be starters.
Yes.
However, they're not going
However,
to act like it. They're not going to
yeah,
act like it. So, bring up my trusty sheet here.
yeah.
All right. So I have 2 on offense and 2 on defense.
Mhm.
AJ Terrell, Grady Jarrett.
Yes.
Let me go on to the offensive side. Jake Matthews, Chris Lindstrom. And I know
Yeah.
you're probably saying to me, YouTube viewers, well, what about Drake London? He still has to earn it. Like,
Right.
he still has to learn the offense. You never know. He may be a slow learner. Who knows? But I'm talking about as far as guys coming back from last year's roster.
Mhm.
Those are the 4 people that I have that are going to be start. You can put it in pen. You can put it in permanent market. Those guys are going to be starters day one guaranteed, and they're going to do everything in their possibility, in their being to make sure they keep that and succeed as well. So
Right.
I'm not too concerned about those guys, but yeah, it's going to be very interesting come July.
Yeah, and I'm not concerned about Kyle Pitts either. I'd add him on the offensive side, that he would
Right.
be that day one starter too. But
Yeah,
what
he
I like
probably he'll probably be around. I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I like about what Grady Jarrett says, even though we're pinning him in as a starter at D tackle, what he said last year, and he was consistent with this across the entire season, was he wasn't taking his starting position for granted, right? He was taking it as an opportunity because he knew that he'd need to prove himself to Dean Pease being under that defensive coordinator for the first year. Now, here's what I see in what we're going to see this year. I don't think he's going to be looking to prove himself per se to Dean Pease, but I do think he's going to be looking for that partnership and showing himself as a leader to say, hey, wherever Dean wants to use me in this defense, I'm up to the challenge. And by him showing that as an example to really everybody on the defensive side of the ball, I think what that does say to them is if our leader is willing to show his best, bring his best, and bring that competitive spirit, even though he knows he's pretty much penciled in as a starter, the rest of us better show up too. And we better show up in that same way, A, if we want to be a starter, or B, if we want to retain our starting role. I
no doubt about it. And I think the whole Pease and Jarrett relationship, I don't think Jarrett would agree to an extension if he didn't feel that, Pease had a plan for him and had and respected him, who he is, not only as a player, but who he is as a man. Yes. Off the field as well. And we know that Pease thinks very highly of one great Jarrett, that's for sure. And we respect you for sticking around right here on ATL Day Ones. But coming up next, I saw nephew run and get out of a pickle last night. I ain't seen that since Deion Sanders. We'll talk about the Braves getting a dub last night and yesterday afternoon, right here. That's coming up next on Locked On Sports Atlanta.